The Oklahoma Sooners have found a replacement for special teams analyst Jay Nunez. Who's that going to be? Let's find out on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. And the top story for today is the Oklahoma Sooners have found their special teams coordinator in one San Diego State special teams assistant, Doug Deakin.
Yeah, and he's been with San Diego State for a long time, 17 seasons in total. Actually, the last 6 as the special teams coordinator, but had also served as the tight ends coach during the 2018 campaign. So he's not strictly a special teams guy, but obviously at Oklahoma, that's going to be the role. And for OU, we talked about this when Jay Nunez left, John. Jay Nunez came in, big time reputation, and the numbers for OU were pretty good in 2022, but they took a big time step in the wrong direction. If you buy into the ESPN SP Plus numbers out there, right, which is the statistical analytical numbers that sort of evaluate all of the efficiency for offensive units, defensive units, special teams units. OU was 39th in special teams SP plus in 2022. They were 94th last season. Obviously, a number of those problems reared their ugly head, John, in the kicking game, especially. That's field goal kicking. That's the punting game for Oklahoma. Gavin Freeman had some problems in the punt return as well for Oklahoma. So OU from 39th in the SP plus in 2022 to 94th last season. And oh, by the way, if you're looking at the preseason SP plus rankings, that's really kind of the one area you look at for Oklahoma that the efficiency dorks out there don't really like OU right now. 14th offensively, 19th defensively, which is a 19-spot jump for OU, but they're 95th in special teams. So this is an area that hopefully Doug Deakin can come in and help fix.
Yeah, it was an area that was underwhelming for the Sooners. It was good at times, but then you had stretches, whether it was at the beginning of the season where the punting was really lackluster, or in the middle stretch where, Zach Schmidt just didn't seem to have his A game, in one of those being a game against Oklahoma State where they lost by 3 points and he misses a field goal. It was kind of a rough stretch for him. Or if it was Gavin Freeman, who, had a nice, really performance in non-conference play, but then as the season went along, it just seemed like either he was pressing or just not having a good feel for the kick coverages that they were facing. So it was hard to really pinpoint where Oklahoma was succeeding on special teams. Now they got Luke Elzinga going in the back half of the season, and he started kicking or punting really, really well. And that was kind of the shining star of the special teams department. But you have to get better. You cannot let one area of those 3 phases, you can't be poor in one of those phases and expect to win at a very, very high level. Now they won 10 games despite a special teams unit that was kind of average, and some might even argue below average. And if you can get that to be a good special teams unit, it's amazing how much that can change the outcome of a game, whether it's a blocked punt or a big return or just being, execution, just executing your field goal operation and making the kicks that you're supposed to make, or, you know, not having shanked punts or busted coverages on returns. So, you know, whether this works out, we'll see. Because like you mentioned, Jay Nunez came with a really solid reputation as a special teams coordinator at Oklahoma. It didn't really pan out that way. A lot were surprised that Alabama came calling, but you know, they needed a new staff to put together under Kalen DeBoer. But you know, Doug Deakin comes with a really strong reputation, and kind of like Brent Venables is a guy that's going to be in a place for a long time. He's not a job hopper. You know, he's been at San Diego State for forever, since his playing days, and this is his first job away from San Diego State. Now, I say that it could be a stepping stone somewhere else where he had to get out from underneath the Aztecs to kind of get his name out there a little bit more, but it's an intriguing up and coming hire. And I think that's what's kind of exciting about this, is that you get somebody that hasn't accomplished it all at the Power 5 level. He hasn't done it all. You know, he's still got something to prove here. And he's going to come into Oklahoma trying to straighten out a special teams unit that, again, was below average, and make it a special part of this team, and make it an asset where they can actually help win football games, as opposed to being drug along the way.
I'm going to share a couple of numbers with you as I read up in real time here with you about Doug Deakin from San Diego State. I think you'll like some of these numbers. In 2021, 3 blocked punts. That tied for 10th in the country. So, look, I love a special teams unit that's able to block some punts here and there. I mean, to me, that's not just, hey, do you have big punt returns? Do you have, you know, good punt coverage, good kickoff coverage, you know, bust a big kickoff return here or there? You're good in the kick department, making field goals. To me, look, if you're blocking a punt or two and blocking some field goal tries or two, that to me is the sign of a well-operating special teams unit. So they did that. 3 times they blocked punts in 2021. This from the San Diego State Files again. In 2022, Deakin's special teams unit ranked 2nd in the FBS and ESPN's special teams efficiency rating. That at the time was the 2nd consecutive season that they ranked in the top 5 there. And then last season, the special teams unit continued to be very efficient. According to what I'm reading, ranked 9th in the FBS per ESPN special teams efficiency ranking. So that would have been the 3rd consecutive season that they ranked in the top 10, according to ESPN special teams efficiency rankings, which, you know, is kind of fascinating that I'm reading that, because according to the SP Plus, they ranked 54th in special teams SP Plus ranking. So, or 56. So I don't really know what gives there, why there would be a difference. Maybe somebody can help make sense of that. But the bottom line is, according to at least one metric, they were incredibly efficient over the last 3 seasons. So that a positive sign.
Well, what I take from that is it's just a team that's going to take care of business. You know, even if it may not be spectacular week in, week out, it's not going to kill you either. Like, you're not going to get muffed punts. You're not going to, you know, shank punts. You're not going to miss field goals. You're going to be kind of on point. And just kind of in the raw numbers, they were a pretty good punting team over the last few years. So hopefully that continues to translate. But hopefully it's a sign that, okay, we're going to go in the right direction. We're going to step in the right direction, because if Oklahoma's special teams unit is able to take a step up, I think that really is going to give them a chance to be even more successful than we think they could be in 2024 and moving forward in the SEC. One guy that's not too sure about Oklahoma's chances moving forward in the SEC, that's one Greg McElroy, who covers the SEC and been a part of the SEC for quite a long time. Let's hear what he had to say coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
And it's time, ladies and gentlemen, to go ahead and get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. Some of the numbers that are out there, NBA Finals odds, Oklahoma City, you can get OKC 25-1, still not too bad for OKC. I don't know if they're going to be winning championship rings right here, right now in 2024, but they're officially, I think, back in the legitimate fray to do so. If you have a strong leaning on Denver going back-to-back, plus 440 right there. NBA Finals odds, Boston Celtics, they're the odds-on favorite, plus 230 from FanDuel. And let's see, the Clippers, plus 500, the Milwaukee Bucks, who still trying to figure things out with one Doc Rivers there, plus 650. But that is FanDuel, an official partner of the NBA.
So the Oklahoma Sooners heading into the SEC, I'm not sure if you all have heard about that or not, but the Oklahoma Sooners are moving into a new conference. And surprisingly, not everybody's exactly sold on their chances in 2024. Obviously, they've got one of the toughest schedules in the conference and really in the country with the slate of games that they have. But a lot of people aren't so sure that they're going to be able to go in and contend for the SEC or even for a college football playoff berth this next season. Greg McElroy, formerly of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and now an SEC analyst, had this to say: the Sooners, they have to prove that they are ready for the grind. If you look at Oklahoma's schedule, they have one of the toughest in the SEC. They have Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, Tennessee. All of the aforementioned won 9 or more games last year. They've recruited SEC level talent, but they also have a lot of things to prove. Brent Venables in his 2 years in Norman, 10-8 against the Big 12, which is not bad, especially taking into account just how much better they were this past season than they were the year before. So progress was made. The problem was the Big 12 got a whole heck of a lot easier last year, and yet they still had losses to Kansas, had a loss to Oklahoma State, and 3 of their 10 wins came against Big 12 first-year teams in BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati, all of which just now got to the Power 5. So let's start with that before we get to some of his other comments. Josh, what is your takeaway from that? What's your rebuttal to that?
Well, Oklahoma was always probably going to enter this offseason with some legitimate questions based on the Kansas and Oklahoma State losses, right? And this is bowl game aside, which I think is another element here that is at play. I mean, he's mentioning these Big 12 games, but I think the loss to Arizona and the fashion in which it happened is also working to shape the narrative for McElroy and others, perhaps nationally. But look, Oklahoma wasn't aggressive enough to end that game at Kansas. They made way too many mistakes at Oklahoma State. And because of that, you're going to pay the price. You weren't in the Big 12 championship game. And a lot of the goodwill that Oklahoma built up nationally with its win over Texas, they gave back with the mistakes and inability to win at Kansas and at Oklahoma State. So to me, whether or not I don't know how much I agree necessarily on, okay, the Big 12 got worse or, it was better in years past. Kansas was a much improved Kansas team this year. Oklahoma State with Ollie Gordon had one of the best players nationally. So I don't really necessarily look at the two games and chalk them up personally as just bad losses, and Oklahoma failed against an easy Big 12 schedule across the board. Kansas and Oklahoma State, to me, respectively, were better than I was expecting last season. But look, Oklahoma lost games that Oklahoma shouldn't lose at Kansas and at Oklahoma State. The facts are the facts are the facts. And because of that, people are going to feel some sort of way in the offseason.
Yeah, those are absolutely winnable games for Oklahoma. Even in the game when they were facing adversity, they still had chances to win it. They just couldn't pull it out. So I get where everybody's coming from, that maybe downplaying Oklahoma and what's coming ahead, especially given all the turnover that they've had along the offensive line at quarterback. But they've got a lot coming back too. And what they've turned over from Dylan Gabriel to Jackson Arnold is also pretty good. Greg McElroy continues. He says, I believe Oklahoma is absolutely trending upward, but there are some question marks. I think Jackson Arnold is going to be a really good player. I love the hire of Seth Luttrell. I think they've done a good job of reinforcing some depth in the portal to an extent, done a good job on the recruiting trail of high school ranks. But this grind that they're about to experience with their schedule is unlike anything they've ever seen in the Big 12. The same can be said for Texas, frankly, but it does feel like Texas surged into the playoffs last year. They're more capable and more prepared to rally up and play teams like this on a week-to-week basis. Oklahoma beat Texas last year, and they weren't supposed to. They weren't considered as good as Texas, but they went and beat them in the Cotton Bowl, in the Red River Showdown. When Texas had 1st and goal at the 1-yard line, Texas couldn't punch it in on Oklahoma's defense. That's getting better year after year after year after year under Brent Venables. So I get why people want to put a little bit of downplay and underscore or underplay what Oklahoma is going to be able to do next year. But please do the same thing for the Texas Longhorns. Yes, they went to the playoff, but they got beat by Oklahoma. This isn't a perfect team. This isn't a perfect Texas team either. They're going to have to go through the same grind and get used to a whole new challenge, just like Oklahoma is. So if we're going to apply, who knows if they're going to be up for the grind to Oklahoma? Let's apply, who knows if they're going to be up to the grind for Texas as well. We cannot sit here and say, oh, Texas is more ready just because they went to the playoff. What was the argument? All those years Oklahoma went to the playoff. They're still not ready for the SEC. Nah, miss me with that nonsense. Oklahoma isn't as good a shape as Texas going into the SEC because both have recruited at a very high level. And again, Oklahoma's got that win over Texas. We just talked about it. Oklahoma shot themselves in the foot against Kansas, against Oklahoma State. And I will contend until I am taking my last breath. If you want to ask me, was Drake Stoops interfered with in the end zone at the end of the Oklahoma State game? I will say yes. And I will carry that one until I'm 105 because that one right there mattered in that game. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, hey, look, you probably don't need to seek apologies from Oklahoma listeners or viewers out there. They hear you on the Drake Stoops thing. Look, I've said for a number of years in regards to Texas that for me, I've seen Texas get up for OU. I've seen Texas get up for Georgia and win those games when they weren't as good of a team maybe as either. But it was the in-between that Texas couldn't deliver on. So I will give Texas a little bit of grace here to McElroy's point that they did prove something to me finally last season. Matter of fact, they lost the game to OU and still found their way to the college football playoff because they took care of the business that they needed to take care of elsewhere. Having said that, I hear what you're saying too, which is, okay, that is still Texas that's done that once out of the last 15 years since Colt McCoy was on the sideline there. So, I mean, Texas hadn't done that since then. So I still have a lot of Texas, can you go do that for me again this season? And if they have, then okay, maybe Sark has turned the corner with Texas and they're going to return to the types of heights that I know some in Sooner land will laugh at that. But look, Mac Brown had Texas for the 2000s as a perennial top 10 program. They didn't always beat Oklahoma. In fact, a lot of times Oklahoma kind of embarrassed them at the Cotton Bowl, but Texas was a legitimate, bona fide national power, top 10 team year after year after year. They haven't been that. They got to show me that they could be that. For OU, look, I'm not going to get too bent out of shape on what McElroy or others feel or think because Oklahoma brought this upon itself with its poor performance versus Kansas and Oklahoma State, and there's no getting around it. Yes, it will be more of a grind than the Big 12 in recent years has been. I would take a little bit to task the comment that Oklahoma has never seen this. They haven't seen it recently out of the Big 12, but once upon a time in 2000, there was a Red October run for Oklahoma in the Big 12. It was believe it or not, it was that same Big 12 conference, the same name. Now that was admittedly about 25 years ago, but hey, who's counting that? So Oklahoma has faced daunting schedules in its history and risen to tell the tale of a national champion on the other side. That is a part of Oklahoma's history. So, but it's fair. It's fair for anyone to have the question, how is Oklahoma, who hasn't won to Oklahoma's liking. And even when Oklahoma over the last, whatever, 10, however many years you want to say, John, whatever your number would be, that time frame where Oklahoma was winning Big 12 championships, they had to win a lot of score-a-thons. And they didn't, on a routine week in, week out basis, go do what Georgia has done to a lot of teams the last couple of years, or what Alabama has done to teams over the last decade and a half. So, look, I get it. Oklahoma is not this program going into the SEC right now that has made a regularity out of embarrassing people, if that makes sense.
No, those are all valid points. And I get, man, where people are coming from on Oklahoma. I do think that they've got something to prove. And I think that's okay. I'm just sitting here wondering why we're not applying that same logic to the Texas Longhorns, who have finally kind of shown something in all of the years of offseason hype that we've gotten out of them. They finally did something. Okay, let's see them do it again. Show me, Bama. And before we start listing Mizzou as a tough game, they got to also prove it to me too, that they can win more than 6 games multiple years with Eli Drinkwitz as your head coach. One of the ESPN's question marks for the Oklahoma Sooners, as they are looking through their top 25 and trying to figure out what the biggest question mark is for each team, it comes for a guy that is going to be taking the helm at quarterback. Let's discuss why ESPN has a question about Jackson Arnold coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Grocery bills are so expensive these days, but now they don't have to be. Start getting cash back on your grocery shopping with the free Ibotta app and get cash back every time you shop. Do you love making money, but also love spending money? Don't we all? Now you can make money while you spend it every time you shop with Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That can cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. So you can buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 off for just trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. Again, they're offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. So ESPN's going through their top 25 and determining, okay, what's the biggest question facing each team. For the Oklahoma Sooners, they asked the question, is Jackson, or how ready is Jackson Arnold? This is Dave Wilson, ESPN college football analyst. Arnold, the number 1 quarterback in the 2023 ESPN 300 and the number 3 overall prospect, was thrust into a starting role for the Alamo Bowl after the transfer of starting quarterback Dylan Gabriel, who decamped for Oregon, while Jeff Levy, the OC quarterback coach who recruited Arnold, also left to be the Mississippi State head coach. The good, Arnold threw for 339 yards and 2 TDs. The bad, he also threw 3 interceptions. With the full spring as the starter under new coordinators Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley, the spring will be a sprint to get Arnold up to speed for the Sooners' first season in the SEC and one of the country's toughest schedules, Josh.
Well, I mean, I think it's a fair question to have about OU. The most important position on the field, you've got a young man in Jackson Arnold that's made one career start. And let's just say it like they said it and call it like we saw it. It was a mixed bag. There was a lot of great, but there was some not so very good either. So because that's the world we're living in, it's only natural that that's going to be a question that some people have about OU. Is Jackson Arnold, in fact, the top quarterback that he was in his signing class, the winner of the Elite 11? Is this guy a surefire, can't miss NFL first round type talent, or is he going to underwhelm to some degree? The bottom line is we can have strong feelings about it, but we really don't know entirely until we get a little further down the road. I'll say this, for Jackson Arnold, I'm not going to get real hung up. And I think we said it immediately after the contest versus Arizona was, we said it before and we said it immediately after too. Don't get too high. Don't get too low, because it's a freshman quarterback making their first start. Anything you do in life, and obviously quarterbacking would fall into this, especially when you're talking about a true freshman quarterback, but anything you do in life, typically you get a lot better the second, third, fourth, fifth time you go about doing it. So, and I know that Jackson Arnold had played a lot of quarterback before stepping foot in Norman, Oklahoma, but he hadn't been the starting quarterback at OU in a football game. And I know he got to play a half down in Provo, but it's going to get easier the more and more he reps throughout the spring. It's going to get more and more comfortable at the beginning of next season. I think we're going to see the 5-star quarterback that we expect to see from Jackson Arnold. I don't know if that's going to be entirely in 2024. I'm optimistic that it can be, or that OU collectively across the board. We're talking about a new special teams coordinator, John. Well, okay, you've got a freshman quarterback you're breaking in, so why don't you cut some corners for him? Why don't you down a couple of punts inside the 10-yard line? Why don't you have that defense turn the corner a little bit more and start resembling what Brent Venables' defenses elsewhere have looked like, and help your quarterback out if, in fact, this is the biggest question for OU?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident that if the offensive line comes together and provides the protection that the quarterback needs, then this thing's going to hum. Like, this offense is going to look really, really good. You bring back Nick Anderson, you bring back Jaden Gibson, you added Deion Burks, Angelo Anthony will be back healthy. You've got some really, really intriguing, speed pieces in Jaquez Petaway and Brandon Thompson. And then you added 4 really nice wide receivers in the 2024 recruiting cycle as well. You got a Jake Roberts, who I think can be a little bit more productive at tight end, and then a Davin Mitchell that, who knows, man, are they going to be able to keep him off the field? That's going to be really fascinating to follow. So, I mean, the skill pieces are all there for Jackson Arnold to go have a fantastic first season as the starting quarterback. That said, like, you're going to have to block for him. You're going to have to get the run game going. You can't have slow starts on the ground throughout, half the season and not face some challenges like against Tennessee or Ole Miss or down in Auburn. You got to get things going pretty quick to make things a little bit easier. And that's not saying you got to make things easy on the kid, but every quarterback needs to have that quote unquote easy button, that this play design is just going to be simple for him. Look at Brock Purdy. Kyle Shanahan basically is always hitting the easy button for Brock Purdy at the NFL level. It took a guy who was mid at Iowa State and helped make him a Super Bowl quarterback. So, so much of this has to come together, the offensive line, the offensive coordinator, the play calling, but I think the talent is there for Jackson Arnold. And if it doesn't go great this year, I don't think that necessarily says everything we need to know about Jackson Arnold. It's a developmental game, but I don't have any doubt there's going to be a lot of success. He's going to learn from that Alamo Bowl loss, the 3 interceptions, the fumble. He's going to learn from that. He's going to learn from the good things he did as well. He's going to learn from all of it. He's a grinder. He's out there. He's going to put in the work. And so I feel very comfortable that Oklahoma's heading in a really, really good direction at quarterback, but he's going to have to develop. He's going to have to improve this offseason. There's a big difference between being the number 2 guy and being the number 1 guy. And then who knows, like last spring, was he getting all those second team reps, or was he getting 3rd and 4th team reps? Was it not until fall that he was getting those second team reps? So, I mean, he's getting an opportunity to get a lot more practice time this spring. That's going to help get him ready for the start of the 2024 season. Any other thoughts on any of this, Josh?
Yeah, I've got one final question in regards to it. Is ESPN right? And maybe this is another longer conversation for another day. I don't know that that's Oklahoma's biggest question going into next season. It's a legitimate question, and I don't think it's unfair or unfounded. But to me, as I'm letting this kick around the noggin a little bit more, the biggest question I have about OU is the defense going to be great? Because there were signs early in the front half of last season that it was, we referenced the goal line stand versus Texas. UCF, they had another one, and then, well, you won't talk about the penalty, right, that happened afterwards that erased the thing. But there were signs, clear, obvious signs that Oklahoma was starting to take the shape, right? Resemble its head coach. And then they backslid to end last season. And okay, you got Danny Stutzman coming back. You have Billy Bowman coming back. You've got Woody Washington coming back. You've signed big-time signees each of these last two classes. So it's not totally put up or shut up time defensively for OU, but it's pretty doggone close. This is the season where it should really start coming together for the Sooners. So that, to me, living this and breathing this and talking about this almost every day, that's the biggest question for OU. Is this the season where it all comes together defensively?
And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube, so hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. You can also hear Josh Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on the KRS Sports app. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at thesoonerswire.com. But until next time, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.